They're like on a diversity scholarship because I'm a brunette and Baptist. They'll be like, why are you here? I don't know, your coffee's amazing. Like Annie said, Dara is unable to make it, so I'm going to need this crowd to be less Lutheran, a little more Baptist. I'm going to need you to bring your A game on questions. I'm going to need some energy. This isn't the frozen chosen here. That's Presbyterians, right? Or Jews. Calm down. I said Baptist. I didn't mean that kind of Baptist. All right, calm down. Anyway, so I'm gonna need that's actually the energy I'm getting. But you're gonna have to be able to handle me giving you shit for it, because I'm from Texas. And we have a lot of problems there, me being one of them. So I'm going to read to you from the beginning of my book. And yeah, let's go. Let's go, girls. All right. My marriage ended on a Monday. I walked into my house at 1 a.m., having just completed a 16-hour research trip to Indiana in 24 hours. I was trying to write my first book while raising a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old with little childcare, and the care I did have was cobbled together Rube Goldberg style from friends and a part-time daycare program at a church. I opened the back door and stepped over the usual pile of shoes and coats into the kitchen. I flipped on the light and saw a trash bag on the floor, spilling the okay, this is fun when you narrate your own audiobook, you learn all the words you don't actually know how to pronounce. This word is pronounced detritus. I've always said detritus, and I think that's because I was homeschooled until high school. And when you get like a producer in your ear stopping you every time you do something stupid, and this was like the first time I got stopped, and she was like, "It's detritus," and I was like, "I've heard it both ways." She was like, "It's too early in the book to start that now." Okay, Cheryl. Anyway, detritus of my life. Go-Gurt wrappers, tissues, plastic plates, goldfish crackers, damp napkins, orange peels, dried chunks of cheese, and a broken toy from a fast food chain. This had happened many times before. My husband emptied the trash and set the full bag on the bench in the breakfast nook. "He'd take it out in the morning," he'd tell himself. Much like the myth of leaving the dishes to soak so he could wash them the next day, perhaps the greatest trick a husband has ever played was convincing himself and his wife that he'd get to a chore the next day. Bless you. I imagine the bag sitting there as he watched Star Trek, slowly wobbling on the edge of the bench until with a wet slap it hit the floor. Maybe he never heard it. He never really had to pay attention like that, to the left behind crumbs, the sticky spots on the floor. But to me, an older daughter of 8 children and now a mother, those small messes were the only things I saw. I had spent the 11 years of our marriage trying to get him to see that the dishwasher drain didn't clean itself, and the socks didn't crawl out of the laundry and find their own mates and put themselves in his drawer. I wanted him to notice. I wanted him to see these small labors. Sometimes I calmly requested, "Please, just take the trash outside." Other times I refused to clean it up. Sometimes I raged. Often he'd be irritated and say he forgot and put off the chore again. Once, in the first year of our marriage, I let the bag sit for an entire week before the smell of rotting garbage filled the kitchen. I was the one who blinked first in that game of chicken, hauling it out and then cleaning the wet mark the bag left on the wooden bench. The stain remains there. Once in a fight, my husband said that each chore was simply a chore, and just that. He was criticizing my propensity to talk not just about the one trash bag on the floor, but all the trash bags that had ever fallen. These were minor things, he argued. Just trash. Not such a big deal. It's easy to see chores as a one-off when they are not the bulk of your life, when your work and leisure aren't woven among the laundry, the dishes, the vacuuming, and the grocery shopping, when you aren't wondering whether there is enough dish soap or if you have enough potatoes for dinner. Standing there in the kitchen that early Monday morning, I was exhausted. Marriage, it seemed, was this, the eternal return of trash on the floor. Nietzsche's idea of eternal return argues that all events in time and space occur over and over and will continue to occur infinitely, as in marriage. People grow and change, yeah, but not that much. In marriage, you have the same arguments over and over as long as you both shall live. My husband was right. I could never just see a pile of trash. I saw all the past piles, and on that morning I saw all the future piles too. I saw an eternity of trash bags. This is my life. This will always be my life. The moment I'd said I do, I'd entered a time continuum where trash on the floor would always happen, and I would always be cleaning it up, and nothing I could do, no amount of couples therapy or list making, could stop the inevitable tumble and wet splat. Looking at the mess, I began to do the mental math. What did I have the energy for? Wiping the floor or fighting? Add those factors together, solve for trash on the floor, and that morning the solution was to just pick it up. Later I went to bed and dreamed I was drowning. I woke up 3 hours later at 5 a.m. to my 2-year-old son patting my cheeks. My son vehemently believed 5 a.m. was the appropriate time to wake up. He's 10, he still does. He's inheriting nothing. just books at this point. Most mornings I would sit with him watching Curious George, drinking coffee and reading the news on my phone, while he snuggled into the corner of the couch with his little blankie rubbing against his cheeks. That morning my body vibrated with exhaustion. But I didn't have time for coffee and Curious George. The house cleaner, a lovely woman from my church who'd offered to help me when she'd asked me how I was doing and I broke out into sobs, was coming that day. And I had to clean up all the mess that had accumulated while I was gone. The truth about accepting help is that it requires asking for it and coordinating it and paying for it, emotionally and financially. Financially, I took on extra freelance work to pay for house cleaning because it wasn't in the budget. Emotionally, I dealt with my husband's heavy sighs when he'd walk into a professionally cleaned home and his angry silences would fill the space between us until I explained I'd sold a little article to pay for it. It didn't come out of the shared checking account. Sometimes my husband would say, "If you want help, just ask." And I would wave my arms around me like someone drowning and say, "Just look, this is all a cry for help." But truthfully, I didn't want help. I was grateful for it, sure. What I wanted was an equal partner. I'm gonna stop there. Spoiler, we get divorced. And I'm gonna take this and we are gonna do some questions. Maybe I will start with, while you all warm up and I sit down, I would like to tell you about why I wrote this book. Let's see. The 2016, let's start there. We're gonna start. Let's start with the 2016 election where, I think like a lot of people, I fallen in love in college. He was a libertarian. And I know you're laughing, but we've all been there. Women are like looking like, oh God, and men are like confused. Like, what? Someone loved you when you were in your Ayn Rand phase, and we're embarrassed about it. That's what I'm trying to say to you men here. God bless you for being here, by the way. Really, it's going to be brutal tonight, and I'm not sorry. But like, and like we'd been different, but we're also like had a lot of shared values. We were in love. We met in high school. school. We both sold shoes at Sears in the Eden Prairie Mall before it was renovated. It's very romantic. And you know, and I'm like a Tracy Flick, like a grubber good girl, right? Like, you go to college, you get good grades, you are the teacher's pet. And also, by the way, I need to say as I say this, I have a former professor in the audience right here. So hopefully he can do one of those, like, this is not a question, more of a comment things, like, fact check. But like, you know, and I was just like, this is what you do for a good life. You check off all the boxes. And I was checking off boxes, and I moved to Iowa, which, in hindsight, huge mistake. If you guys will take me back as a refugee. You know, it was all these things, and I was like, this is just what you do to be a good person and have a good life. I was checking off all these boxes, and I wasn't happy, you know, and I wasn't happy, and I wasn't doing what I wanted, and I just thought, well, that's just what life is. Like, this is what it means to be a woman and be married. You put your things on hold while you do the thing for the man, but eventually it will be your turn. And it was never my turn. And sometime around 2016, I had been writing more. My kids were a little older. A publisher had reached out. They'd seen an article I'd written about religion and politics in Iowa right before the 2016 caucuses, which, you know, in hindsight was like the most prescient things I'd ever written. I've written a lot of duds. We're not talking about them right now, but that was a good one. And they were like, can you turn this into a book? And I was like, this is my dream, you know. And I was like, finally, it's my turn. The kids I'm done, you know, zip, like, it's over. Let's do it. It's my turn. And it wasn't my turn. And I was trying to do this, and I was realizing, wait, this is hard. I'm not getting the help, the participation, the partnership I need. And everything was falling apart as the country was falling apart. And I was realizing not just the deep divides in our country, but also the deep divides in my marriage that I had ignored for a while, because it's easy to ignore things when you're a middle-class white person, right? And all these things were happening, and it also with trash bags, and it broke my marriage apart. But even then, I wasn't like, oh, this will be a great book, you know. It wasn't until the 2020 shutdowns when a friend called me and was like, and I was working for my local newspaper then. She was like, how are you? She's married, has 2 children. She's like, how are you? How's being a single mom? How are you? And I was like, it was one of those days where my kids were with their dad, and I was like, I'd gotten a nap, you know, my house was clean, I was alone, I had a dog. I was like, I'm living the fucking dream. You know? I was like, I'm working for like poverty wages for a local newspaper and getting like backlash from the local GOP party, which resulted in, you know, bomb threats. But I was like, also, I feel great, you know? You know, like, we're all going through it, so. And she was like, wait, what? And I was like, explaining to her, I was like, no, with like 50-50 custody, like, this is like, I actually get to work. And she was like, wait, you should ask me how I'm doing. And I was like, no, I know Janice, not great, you know. Kevin's up in the closet doing Zoom calls, and you're with the kids. Like, you know, and it was like, I think it was at that point where I was like, there's something here. And being, I like to be like, being a journalist, really it's just being a homeschooled nerd. I'm just like, let's research. And I started researching. I started seeing all these studies that were just like, single mothers, even if they have sole custody of their children, have more free time than their married counterparts. I'm so sorry, men, but on average, you add 7 hours of labor to your wife's life. And I was like, this is a scam. This is a scam. And so I wrote a book proposal, and that's how the book came about. And I really wanted to, and I know I'm not the first person, like, you know, Lucy Stone, Simone de Beauvoir, were all Sojourner Truth. They were all like, marriage is a scam. And, but I think one of the things that really frustrated me was like,
we romanticize a system that is a driver of inequality. And I want to talk about the way that this system excludes people, has historically excluded people, is a driver of inequality, and the ways that we can fight for our inequality. And God bless Brodsky and fair play, but like, that doesn't involve extra labor on our part with like cards and shit. You can just say no and walk out. And I think that that's a valid way to do it. The cards are also great, but I don't really like card games, so. Yeah, all right, is that good? Are you guys warmed up? Who wants to ask a question? Yes?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so I work full-time as a family mediator and a custody evaluator, and I hear your story,
Yes.
this story, 5 days a week, sometimes on
Yes.
weekends. And I hear very, very similar things on repeat. So I get to do my own research because they're in front of me. Are you hearing this story? Do you hear this story everywhere you go?
Yes.
Is there hope?
So, yeah, okay, so let me just repeat your
And
question.
divorce.
Yes, and you're congratulations. Yes, great,
5 years.
good. Oh my God. So what the question is basically you are a divorce mediator and you hear my story ad nauseum, and you also want to know, is there hope? And so, okay, so 2 questions. You want to know if I hear these stories too. So one thing that I did is the way I announced my divorce was not on Facebook, you know, like a normal Iowa mom would do. Was I just kept really quiet about, well, with my friends I was very loud, but, and then right before, I'm answering your question, but I'm going to do it a long way, but like right before our divorce is finalized, and to my credit, it was supposed to have been finalized before, but, you know, even mediated divorces are a slog. And so I'd written an article for Glamour that was titled, "Now That I'm Divorced, I'm Never Cooking for a Man Again." And it went up in 2018, 1 month before the divorce was finalized, 2 months after it was supposed to be, and it went viral. And Rush Limbaugh was talking about it, like Roxane Gay was talking about, everybody was talking about it, and it wasn't like, I didn't anticipate that, you know, but what happened was, what you're talking about is I started getting emails and DMs from women who were like, yes, or I'm still married, but my life is your life. And I think that was one of the first times where I was like, because divorce is so individualized as an individual failure that it's hard to pull your head up and see that it's actually like divorce is an individual accomplishment. Marriage is a systemic failure. And it's actually not a systemic failure because it's operating the way the system was designed to operate with a lack of equality. So we can get to that later. But the point is, I was like hearing all these stories and I was like, oh my God, this isn't just me. This is a whole system, and it's a bunch of women who are so lost and trying so hard to make a broken system work, and they all want to share their stories. So in my book, I have these interstitials, which I imagined it as like When Harry Met Sally, you know, where like they're talking about how they fell in love, and I like pitched it to my editor, and I was like, but it's like how they divorced, and she was like, all right. I really worked hard to sell her on it, so if you hate it, just be quiet. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, so I hear this, and here's what I say and so you're talking about hope. Yes, I think there's hope, because I think 2020 broke us. And we continue to be broken. And I think one of the things that we're realizing is, like, in 2020, that social safety net that we were told nobody can afford was suddenly there. Like, the child care tax credit was expanded, and children were millions of children were lifted out of poverty. And it's like, we could have been doing that this whole time? No, you know, and I think that's like, it really broke a lot of people's brains, and I think also being in lockdown stripped of all the Rube Goldbergian like systems that we pull up to kind of like help us get equality, I think a lot of women were like, oh yeah, no, sucks without my mom helping us out or whatever. And so there are a lot of people not just leaving their marriages, but if you look at the statistics, younger women are opting out. And I think that is why we have a lot of like moral panic currently around divorce. It's so interesting is the word I'm going to use. I had an MFA professor who was like, whenever you say interesting, that's because you don't want to say something else. And I was like, yeah, that's right, AJ. Like, I'm from the Midwest. Like, I'm not going to say it. Not to you, anyway. But, you know, so yeah, let's just leave it at interesting. But like, it's interesting that my book's coming out at a time when there are also 2 other very well-received books that are just like, just get married. It's better for the children. You know, and I think there are these cultural pushes to push women back into these places, but we wouldn't have the backlash if there weren't the progress, if we weren't redefining gender, if we weren't breaking binaries, if, you know, women weren't opting out and finding freedom and being like, hell yeah, this is great. So that's the thing that gives me hope, and when I do see backlash, I always have to remind myself what instigated the backlash, and it was always progress. And it's progress, and I think we're fighting for that progress, and it's dark days, right? Like, women have fewer rights now than we did even like 10 years ago. That sucks. I also think that like the anti-LGBTQ laws, the trans exclusionary laws, those are all part of it because we're all trying to shove gender back into a box, but it's happening because we have progress. Yeah, on that note, who else? Another good yes, hello.
Hi. If you could kick Kim Reynolds out of office
Mm-hmm.
and you're governor for like a day, like
Me?
yeah.
The governor? Yes. I've never considered this before. Yeah.
And you had a friendly legislature.
Uh-huh.
Or like, what are your first 3 bills you're passing?
Well, I mean, I gotta undo some shit first.
Yeah.
So, first 3 bills I'm passing. Okay. Oh God. So this is a terrible question to ask me because I've worked as a local journalist for a few years. So I'm like deep in. It's actually not terrible. It's a great question, but like because I'm steeped in the lore of the laws and everything. And so I think one of the things at first I would do is go back to. So we lightly privatized our Medicare and Medicaid, which has these like real big like problems with now we have rural hospitals shutting down. It's hard to get health care. It's hard to, and that also ties into a lot of the like trans exclusionary healthcare policies that they're talking about. So I would go back and be like, okay, let's unfuck Medicaid and Medicare and expand it and start there. Then we do some free school lunches, right? Like Minnesota did. Good job, y'all. That was amazing. Yes, yes. Let's feed some children. They also have been like doing the being more restrictive on SNAP benefits. So I think I would start with like getting people health care and feeding children. I think that would take a day if I had some free time. After that, I would go back and like, you know, make sure that the right to an abortion was codified in the Constitution. So, like, do a little ERA-ing there. If we can turn that into a verb, and we will, because I'm a writer. I can do whatever I want with the English language. And yeah, I think that would be a start. But that Medicare stuff is really terrible, and it sucks, and it's really hard to get healthcare, especially in rural areas. And I know y'all are having that hard time too, so. Hello.
Hi, I'm from Iowa.
Oh no, we're in Iowa.
I'm from DeWitt originally.
Oh,
but
cool.
It's like an hour from Cedar Rapids.
Yes, I know where
drive there.
DeWitt is, yeah. Do I know your mom?
And I just wanted to say I just listened to your audiobook, really
Thank
loved
you.
it. And I got divorced, I don't know, 15 some years ago. And at the time I was going through my divorce, my life raft was Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat,
Yes.
Pray, Love, all that stuff. And I just love how your take on it takes on the system and puts it in a bigger context, and it isn't just about fixing myself, it's the bigger thing. So I just want to say I enjoyed it, and it's interesting how things move forward.
Yeah, I think I love that book too, and there's so many like divorce memoirs. And when I was writing this book, I was reading a lot of them, like reading a lot of marriage memoirs, a lot of divorce memoirs, a lot of my husband died memoirs, which are weirdly a lot like divorce memoirs in some ways. All of it by Rebecca Wolf is incredible. But I think one of the things that really frustrated me was like, we are once again individualizing a systemic problem. And like we make women feel like the failure of a marriage is a personal failure, when I truly think it is so impossible to find equality in a society that has a pay gap. Like, so when you sit down to say who's gonna like take care of the kids, you're like, well, you earn less. Who earns less? The woman. Why? Because of a pay gap. And it's like, how can you overcome that on an individual level when an entire system is like weighing down on you? And I think one of the things I really wanted to do was like be, and I'm not insulting other books here, I'm just trying to say the way that I wanted to enter that conversation. I wanted to write the book that I wished I had had, which was one, like an unapologetic, balls to the wall, like just like, yeah, I did it. It was the fucking best thing I've ever done in my entire life, and I recommend it for other people. I was doing a podcast with a woman and she was like, but I'm sure you're not recommending divorce for everyone. And I just smiled and she goes, and it's an audio medium, so like, and she's just like, and I was like, maybe. Why do you want one? I know the lawyer, you know, she's like, young lady. But yeah, I think like what a lot of these like very, and I think there's also like a lot of divorce memoirs that are like, well, I got divorced, but it was like these very extreme circumstances. And I know as a person who was in a bad marriage, or in a marriage that sucked for me because I was unhappy, like I was reading those books and I was like, well, he doesn't hit me or light the house on fire, so maybe I can make it work. And I wanted to raise the bar. Like maybe that's not where the bar should be. Like maybe it should be higher. Maybe like somebody read my book and was like, well, my husband takes out the trash, so I'm in a good marriage. And I unfortunately, I chose violence and replied, and I was like, I think the bar should be higher, and like, than taking out the trash. She was like, that's really mean. And I was like, did Kevin's feelings hurt? Like, but it's always, I keep using the name Kevin because it is not a name that is associated with me in any sphere. None of my friends are married to a Kevin. Like, no, there are no, and so that's the name I keep using because it's the name that's least likely to offend. It's also a funny bit. Like, 90% of the time, I'm just doing things for a joke. This whole divorce thing was a bit. I'm committing to bits you couldn't possibly understand. But no, that's why I chose Kevin. But if you would like to suggest another name, I can overhear it seems like really bothered. Maybe you know. But I wanted to be. We're serious. Now we're talking about intersectional feminism. Let's focus. And so I wanted to be more intersectional. I wanted to say not that these are just personal failures, but like we have a system where 30% of marriages have domestic violence. That is not an accident. You know, these things like don't happen by accident. They happen because this is the way we design the system. And I wanted to be more inclusive. I wanted to say, let's take a bigger look. Like, let's look at the way marriage has traditionally excluded enslaved people, through racism, black women, through, I want to talk about LGBTQ people have been excluded for years and years, and that's for a reason, right? I want to talk about how now people who are disabled are excluded from marriage because, like, to get married, they'd have to give up benefits that literally save their lives. So when we talk about marriage and when we talk about leaving it, we cannot ignore that this is a profoundly political thing, and I just don't want us to ignore that because that's my whole beat, is making people see that the personal is political and you cannot escape that. And we need to be better. Be better. Kevin, be better. Hi, yes.
Hi. I'm wondering how you thought about the balance of memoir and research in each of your chapters, and also how you thought about once you kind of gathered the research, what bits you were going to share and how you would convey it in a way that wasn't sort of like too dense for the chapter.
Yeah, that was really, so all my books kind of do this where I'm like, personal research. And I mean, if you want to talk about how I've done it in other books compared to other books, that's your conversation. I think all my book children are perfect. But it is hard because, you know, I knew when I was writing this book, I was going to be writing like an anti-patriarchy manifesto, but I wanted people to read it, right? Like, so you're like, oh, all right. So when I was going to sell it, I had a couple editors who were very interested, and a lot of them had different ideas, where there was one editor who was like, you should just interview different women around the country and tie it in that way. And I was like, I love this topic, and I would not read that book, because that sounds boring as hell. And I have a limited attention span, right? I love to watch Girls 5 Eva. And I have 2 children, you know, and dogs, and I need, you know, so I was like, what is a way that I can tell this story that will explain the system, but will also be a compelling read? And that was something I worked really hard. When I chose the editor, I felt like I chose the one who got it. She grew up in Georgia. She's very blonde. She lives in, you know, she's a sorority girl. They get it. They always get it. And even though they're the problem, they also get it. I'm sorry. I was Sigma at Gustavus, so I'm also a part of the problem. But so we went through, and I turned this book in like 20,000 words over what it is now, and we went through, and she was ruthless. There were a lot of times where she was like, the second chapter especially, she's like, this doesn't work. And I was like, fine, I'll just burn it down and rewrite the whole thing. She was like, I think you can salvage it. I was like, no. But yeah, it was like, how do we make a compelling narrative that also gives like you know, centuries worth of history and research in an accessible way? Because I think a lot about audience. I'm a writer who grew up on the internet. My career came out on the internet. I think that's okay to be audience focused, but that was a lot. And so I think one of the things that I really tried hard to do was just like keep it really personal, and always, because people also love a mess. I also love a mess. And I knew that would pull people in, because that's what would pull me in. And so, yeah, it was a struggle. It was a back and forth. I mean, I wrote the book in a year, but then the editing took another like year and a half, because we were just really like, what works, what doesn't, you know, my editor would be like, this is a drag, this is a drag, this is a drag. And like, she wasn't like, you're a bummer. She was like, it's literally physically weighing down the material. So how can we make this better, more accessible? And yeah. So hopefully I've got it. Can I just say, my mom was like, it's too easy to read. And I was like, Ellen, it's a feminist. This is actually her real name. I'm not making up name. I was like, Ellen, it's a feminist manifesto. People need to read it. And she was like, yeah, but it could have at least, you know, been a little denser. I was like, you write a book. That's why I don't go home to Texas. Yes, hi.
Okay, comment first, then question.
Is this about Kevin?
I mean, literally my husband's name, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, but also sorry.
He's fantastic, it's fine. And it's not because he takes out the trash. But you had said earlier, the personal is political, but I think one of the things that you're hitting on is the way you make your book work is because you make the political personal, right? You do the opposite. So you can draw people in saying, this is how, it made me think of Aubrey Gordon.
Oh yeah, love Aubrey
She's
Gordon.
talking about how this is how you change people's minds. It's not by the politics, it's by the personal, right? You tell the stories and you get people to understand the bigger picture based on the smaller story. But my question is, what was your favorite butthurt response to the book?
The book's only been out a month. I will say one thing I noticed is it got a little bit, so far it's gotten a moderate amount of attention in those like websites that like claim to be journalism but are just like Republican rants. And like the Washington Examiner, I'll just say. And so this guy, and I try, like, I don't scrap, you know, well, I do scrap, but I try to pick better targets. But this was too easy, where this guy was like, I read an excerpt of this woman's book in the Washington Post, and now I'm going to like trash the whole book in an op-ed piece for the Washington Examiner. And he was like, and his whole thing was like, she's terrible to men, and I was like, yes. So nice, thank you. But like, he had done this thing where he literally was like, I didn't read the book, but let me tell you what I think about it. And it's like, men, like, just like, be less, take the Kenergy down a notch. And I think I tweeted something where I was just like screen grabbed it, and I was like, just read the book next time, bucko. And he replied, and he was like, I will if you send it to me. Clueless! And I literally was like, I already divorced one man who wanted me to do extra labor for him. Like, you're a writer. I'm sure you know how to find a copy of the book if you need a woman's help. You've already answered the question. Everyone else watching this, buy the book. Thank you. So that was a joy and a delight to me. That was really that was one of my favorite angry responses. So yes, hi.
Hi, I read your book Godland and really liked it. I'm also a crazy that listens to right-wing podcasts and preachers and that, and found two in the last 2 weeks where they're talking about complementarianism and Reagan on feminism without defining either. And now we've got things popping up about birth control that are coming up. So how can we like muster ourselves to take on that war?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to like, it's really easy to be like, those guys are the problem, right? Like these, like, it's just the Republicans. I say that like, I'm like, oh no, are there Republicans in the room? No, it's not Iowa. But I do think the best way to combat it is to look at ourselves and the systems that we support. I think like there are a lot of, how am I trying to, pro-marriage programs have been a part of every single presidential like policy platform. It doesn't matter the party, right? And that's because they don't want to fund a social safety net. It's because we want women to be the social safety net. And there's great sociologist Jessica Calarco, who's out of Wisconsin. I know you don't like Wisconsin, but we have to like her. Everybody buy her book. It's coming out in June. And I think what the reality is like, we can say, oh, those guys are taking away the right to, abortion. Also, just fucking say abortion. Start there, first of all. Like, don't be weird about it. Like, but that stuff doesn't start. It starts in people being homophobic. It starts in people being trans exclusionary, right? It starts with people defining gender in narrow ways and I think that is where that starts tripping up political lines and starts tripping into ideological lines. And so what I would always say to people is like, yeah, you can't go convince your shitty, Republican uncle who lives next door to me. Like, he does, all of them. Like, you can't convince him, but you can look at the way that your own life upholds systems of oppression. You can look at the way that your own choices uphold systems of oppression. And you can call out your own, politicians, even the liberal ones, who also uphold systems of oppression right now. We are currently funding a genocide overseas. That is a system of oppression that we are participating in. And so I think that, I think it's about being intersectional. I think it's about opening our eyes. I think it's about being able to do the work. And that's the other thing, is like, you cannot change the world by yourself. I'm so sorry. I know they told you that in kindergarten. I was homeschooled, so nobody told me that in kindergarten. Lucky me. But you can find the thing that you're good at, and you can do that. You can get involved in your community and do that thing in your community. I think I have like so many people, and y'all, I live in Iowa. I don't even live here, so like I've been overcome by despair so often. And what I decided to do was like, okay, what's the thing I can do? So I volunteered with Meals on Wheels. I can feed people. That's what I can do. And then, and now I work on the board of the Iowa Abortion Access Fund because I can bully politicians into sharing our information because they're all a little scared of me. I love it. But I've gotta, these are the things I can do. I can raise money to fund abortions, and so I will do that. And I think that, what I can do is different than what you can do, and that those are the things that give me hope. Because we all have those things that we're good at, and we are all fighting in our own little corners. I remember reading Voltaire in college and being like so pissed because it ends with like, well, it's very funny, but it also ends with like, tend your own garden. And I was like, that seems like very isolationist, And now I'm like, 41 and I'm tired and I've got these eye bags and I'm like, yeah, my garden's the greatest place that I want to be. I don't want to be anywhere else but my own fucking garden. But what I think it is about, you find the place you can cultivate and grow something, and that's what you do, and you make that place good, and you trust and hope that other people are doing the same in their own gardens. And I think that that's the way we fight it, hopefully. Yes, hello.
Hi. As a politician,
Oh,
I
hi.
would say that, hey, Amy. Even if you have really progressive, people representing you, still let them know, because that gives us cover to say, this is what our people need and our people want, and supports us being better.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing the work. Hi. Hello.
So I know that your home is very special to you. And my home is special to me too. That is just mine. What is one of the favorite things that is yours in your home?
Oh, so I am so lucky that I live in a state nobody wants to live in. So homes are very affordable. I always joke, I'm like, yeah, homes are affordable, but there's nobody there to hear you scream. It's kind of funny, but when you think about it, it's actually kind of sad. You guys are going to go home and be like, oh, I feel sad. Good. So I have this cute little house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that I just love. I was able to buy it in 2019. And I love it. I paint it. I do all sorts of shit with it. I watch YouTube dads who teach me how to fix the plumbing. And the thing that I love the most about the house is this back porch. It's what made me fall in love with the house. And it's just this porch that, on my little I don't do Pinterest. My daughter now does Pinterest. She's 13. Her birthday's tomorrow. She's like, Mom, you gotta see all these ways we can organize the refrigerator. She's a type A older daughter, so I'm raising myself, so I do this to myself. And I'm like, leave me alone, so I like my little back. I sit out in the back porch all the time, even in the extreme cold. I have all these blankets and a little heater. and I just love to sit out there and listen to my I'm like a sad dad. I like sit out there in the cold with my glass of whiskey and listen to Jason Isbell. I'm like the toxic man I want to see in the world. Sometimes I put on my little vinyl record player, you know, and it's played. I have like 4 Jimmy Buffett records. The liner notes on those slap real hard. Like, yes, you gotta read them. It's like wild. Like Harrison Ford's cracking the whip in one song, and you're like, I would not have known that had I not made the choice to divorce and become a 50-year-old divorced dad. I'm growing a beard next. That's my next book. Just kidding. But that I think that just that porch and sitting there and having coffee there in the morning and doing my little Wordle and connections, and that just having that place of peace and fresh air and where I just feel so great all the time. I love it. Hi.
Can you speak a little bit about spousal maintenance, and have you, like, I think it's such an archaic thing. I'm divorced.
Yeah.
I am luckily a recipient of spousal maintenance, and I never want to remarry, so it's not an issue for me. But the fact that when somebody remarries, that they lose that. Either my feeling is I either earned it by staying home and doing all that stuff for 26 years, or I didn't. And why should I have to depend on another marriage to supply that, or supply, like, it puts me at risk if I lose that money.
Yeah, I think like it's right, like this gets to the very nuanced point that like the laws in America are fucked, right? Like they don't really allow for, like, you know, I remember, and so like Iowa has like very liberal divorce laws. I'm like better than New York. We also legalize gay marriage, you know, also, and it's just been downhill ever since. But you know, like I remember talking to my lawyer, and she was like, you know, there's like this very clear formula and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, but like lives don't always fit in the formula, right? And like, how does this work? And she was just like, well, it's the law, we have to stick with the formula, right? And so I do, and I remember also talking to her later after she was very helpful with the book, and I think she still likes me, but like she, you know, she was talking about how like she often advises clients like if they have, or advises people like if they have a stay-at-home spouse, literally just pay that person a salary out of an account and like because she's like, because that makes life so much easier should the marriage fall apart, because you could say, listen, I was valuing the labor, we were doing a salary. And so I think you're talking about like spousal maintenance is like the law's like complicated way of trying to compensate women for unpaid labor. But you know, but it's like, but the laws are different in every single state. Like how it works out is different in every single state. It's never gonna be easy. It's never gonna be fair. And like, it's really easy to kind of like, let's use a hypothetical. If you, that is absolutely nothing I've ever deeply researched, that like, say you were perhaps a wealthy politician, a state legislator in the state of Iowa, and you had 5 children, and your wife had been, you know, a stay-at-home mom for many years, but all your money was like tied up in like, hey.
Hi, I suck.
Hi, I'm answering a question, so, okay. And so like all your money was tied up in the family farm. So like how you look at the assets then is very different. Like, so like if the family farm was giving him a $25,000 salary, but you know, like $20,000 bonuses every year, the child support, spousal maintenance is gonna be very different. So it's like, it's a complicated system that's very easy to game. And by the way, that person who's very hypothetical really only pays $300 a month for his 5 children. I know, it's disgusting. I know. He's related to a senator, if you need to know. But like, I mean, can you figure it out? Clues. Not the lady senator. but yeah, so like that's what I'm trying to talk about. It's like the laws, like really complicated ways of trying to pull together like a modicum of equality, but it is very like insufficient, and this is why like, you know, I don't know. This is where the personal gets deeply political.
Well,
yeah.
and then I think my point
Yeah.
goes to, if that person marries again.
Yeah.
So again, it's like reinforcing your marriage thing.
Yeah.
You lose it unless, I mean, if you marry somebody
Right, because
else,
you've married a man,
and
right?
somebody
you
else
need
is
to-
there
yeah.
to support you now.
Yes.
It seems so ridiculous to me. Either you earned it or you did. Like if it's
Yeah.
a permanent situation or what for how many years, it shouldn't change if you decide to partner
Well,
with somebody else.
I mean, I think what it really shows is that like our marriage system was based on the laws of coverture, right? And that it hasn't ever really changed, and we like to pretend it's changed. But if you think, I mean, like, you guys don't even know that it wasn't until the early 2000s that like raping your spouse was made illegal in almost all states. I think, yeah, all states then. That's not that long ago, right? And nothing says you're a piece of property like what you're talking about, like spousal rape laws, like all those things. And it's because marriage as a political system, as a legal system, is based on the laws of coverture, right? Which came out of like, you know, the kings of England. Thank you, King Henry VIII, for that. And, you know, and that we like to pretend it's equal, but it's still, there's still like inequality baked in the system, which is one of the reasons I wrote this book, to say like relationships are great, they're wonderful, we need relationships to survive, but the way our system has codified relationships is to make us less of a person and to render our labor invisible and unpaid, but also somehow necessary to keep the world, America, functioning. So yes, like what you're bringing up is like a perfect example of, one, you're a piece of property, right? Because now you don't just get that money anymore now that you're somebody else's property. So that sucks, and I am sorry. Hi, yes.
Hi, I don't exactly know how to phrase this, but so you have these two children with your ex, and you wrote this book.
Yeah.
How does that delicate dance now work? Because he knows that you've written this book, and you're like, yeah. But just, and you know, I know, like I read your Substack, so I know that, you know, he's still in the church.
Yeah, we have 50-50 custody. You know, that my kids have a great relationship with their father. And as far as everything else, I know people are very curious, and I'm a very open person, but that qualifies under the category that my kids call nunya. Yeah. Which I don't mean that rudely, but it's just like, that's the part that I can't write about. It's nunya business. But I think that's also from a Disney movie, isn't it? My kids like to pretend they invented it. What?
Moana.
It's Moana? Guys, I kept falling asleep during Moana. Sorry, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Okay, so I just want to apologize to everybody and also to Liz in public. I wrote this down as tomorrow, and she called me, and I was like fully over at Cedar Lake, just like trying to get my composure, and she was like, "Where are you?" And I was like, being the worst person on the planet Earth. But I love your book so much, and so many, one of the things that I wanted to say was like, I've also been an American ex-wife, or I currently am an American ex-wife, and like so many things I was like, oh my God, that's my life, and oh my God, that's my life, and oh my God, that's my life. So thank you for doing all of that. And I also never talk about my custody stuff with my ex. Never. I never talk about it. So you can watch my social media all day, every day. You'll never see it.
But I do think it is like, you know, but I think like the interesting thing too is like what does equality actually look like? And you know, I remember fighting for that so hard in my marriage and not getting it, not feeling like I got it. And it's not that I don't think he was trying, it's just that like there's a bar, right? And the way we socialize men and the way we train men to see labor. And so coming out of that was just like a huge revelation. I was like, oh, there's the one thing the law did for me. I was like, oh yeah, that is actually feels a little bit more equal. How are we on time?
I think we can take like 2 more questions.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions.
Hi. this is kind of in the same vein, so I'm not sure if it'll be too personal or not, but as someone else who is divorced from someone who, you know, has no problems with the status quo of regular marriages and who also shares custody with two kids, like, how do you model that? You know, not talking about your ex in particular, but how do you model that for your kids that, like, you know, maybe what you have individually and as a society that we've set up doesn't have to be the ideal, and you know, how do you kind of grapple with that? Like,
Yeah. Two things is I don't hide my labor from my kids anymore. I think it was really easy when I was married to like put my work on the fringes, and that I was just like when I was with them, you know, I'm a mother. And mothering is really stupid in America because we're like, you can't look at your phone at the park because what if your child fell? It's like, yeah, like they fall, they're kids, they're dumb, like they get up. And, but like now I think like one of the things divorce forced me to do was like show them the labor because I couldn't hide it from them anymore. And I felt a lot of guilt about that, but like, now that they're a little older and they're part of my work in so many ways, like in ways that they participate, they help cut stickers for these book events. They love to come to book events for me. When I worked at the newspaper and it was the shutdowns and we turned the sports pages and the kids pages, they participated. They were like, here's crafts, let me help you. And like, and they like, and I think that they see the work and the labor in a way. So that's one thing. And I think it's so easy to hide your labor from your kids. Don't hide it. Show them. Make them a part of it. That's a little harder, especially when kids are little, but I think it's worth it. The other thing that I really try hard to do is to show them all the lives that are possible. Like, there is more than one way to live a good and happy life. I have two dear friends. They are both queer women. They live next door to each other in these tiny little houses in Cedar Rapids. They call it their little neighborhood. My kids love to go visit Jocelyn and Molly because they're like, you can live next door to your best friend when you grow up. Why would anybody get married if life could just be a constant sleepover with your best friend? Which is an excellent point, right? Like, why didn't I move in with my friend Kate when I had the chance? Kate, why? But like, it was, but like my sister, their favorite aunt. They like to say, they have a million aunts, and they like to be like, we don't have a favorite aunt, but Aunt Becky, who lives in Chicago, is very cool. And like, she didn't marry for many, many years, finally married her longtime partner for health insurance reasons. And they're child-free by choice. They live in this cool apartment in Chicago. They have busy, exciting lives, and like, and my kids are like, oh, this is a way to live, like, and so I just try as much as possible and intentionally as possible, and I had to do this post-divorce in a way I didn't have to before, but is build an intentional community that is inclusive and diverse and make my kids a part of that and let them see that and be part of this community with me. One, because I needed it. I don't live near family, and God, if I did, that would be a different kind of a book. But like, and it's like, but also because I need it for myself, and also because it's like a beautiful way to show your children that like, you can find happiness and life outside of the binary, outside of, the one man, one woman, a live, laugh, love sign and a vinyl sided house, out in Chanhassen. He's picking on Chanhassen. And local jokes. I love it. So those are the two things I really try hard to do. I'm terrible at advice, so it's not prescriptive, but like those are the things I really try hard. It's just to be like, life can be whatever you want it to be. So yeah, and then I saw, yes, hi. Did you have your hand raised? Yes.
Okay, I know you just said you're terrible at advice.
Yes.
That's part of the question that I did have. So I do have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
But you can pick whichever one you want to answer.
Okay.
Since we are running out of time.
Perfect.
My first question is what your advice would be. I feel like for people starting in the beginning, because this is a book about divorce.
Yeah.
So like in the beginning stages, like I feel like before marriage, what is like an advice you would give for like before starting
lead you eventually to
Right.
divorce. Yeah.
That is one of the questions, and my other question, I've forgotten. So we'll just.
Perfect. If you think of it. So
It
what?
was so like.
Yeah. So what I would say is there's everything in our culture that wants to make you feel bad for being single. It wants. Yeah, you remember?
I remember.
Okay. What's the other one?
What is equality in a marriage?
Just real quick question.
Okay. Let me start with this.
One.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
whatever you have.
I would say that like everything in our country wants to make you feel bad. Your aunt at Thanksgiving wants to know why you're not married yet, right? Like people, if you are choosing to be single or you know are partnered, everybody wants to know why you're not putting yourself out there on the apps, you know. And I think the thing that I would always say is like, to you, if you're beginning a journey that could eventually lead to divorce, I hope it does. Once somebody told me, I was like, I'm just a sad sack divorce lady, and it was this like very beautiful, it was Olivia Nuzzi, who's this beautiful, talented journalist, and she was like, no, you're not a sad sack divorce lady, you're a bitch who's lived. Yeah, that's what I think all the time, but I think there's everything in our culture that makes, that will try to make you feel bad for not being partnered, for not being heterosexually partnered, or whatever. And I think the two things that I would say is like, don't succumb, protect your peace, protect your happiness. Find the things that make you happy, the relationships that make you happy, and seek those. Like, don't just seek romantic partnership for romantic partnership. And also set the bar. Like, I read this incredible book by the sociologist Jane Ward. It's called A Tragedy of Heterosexuality. And she really kind of queers the narrative. Yeah, people are like, man, it's a great book. And nobody fucks you up like a sociologist. Like, they'll just be like, you think you know something? You're wrong. And here's an intelligent way of describing it. And you're like crying at 2 a.m. reading a book of sociology. Or just me. But like, she talks about like, you know, she really talks about like how, you know, we socialize men to hate all the things women love, Taylor Swift, and women to like hate the things men like, and like so then you're supposed to get married in this like weird heterosexual dynamic where like people don't actually enjoy the same things. And coming out of my marriage, I was like, the bar is no longer the best man I've dated or been with. The bar is now the best relationships I've had, which means my friendships, which means my relationship with myself. And so that's where I set the bar now. And it's like, where do you add to my happiness? Can you add to a night of Girls Five Ever, a bowl of pasta, and my vibrator? If you cannot, I don't want it, right? And I think that's where the bar needs to be, and everybody will be like, just settle. Why?
Well, I would
And
also-
that, and oh, sorry, and I was gonna answer the question on equality and just say that, like, I think systemically, equality is really hard. Like, and I would see equality as like equal sharing of labor and like all the labor, cognitive. We really misuse emotional labor, and you know, Arlie Russell Hochschild is out there mad at us, but I do say emotional, cognitive, physical, all the labors. So it would be an inclusive definition of all kind of labor would be equality, but also realizing that we live in a system that forces inequality on us, especially in marriage. And so negotiating that on a one-to-one basis is gonna require some sort of negotiation of who is unequal at this point, and refusing and having those conversations early, often, and as honestly as possible, so that resentment doesn't build up. And so those would be the two things I would say. And I'm so sorry. Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think that your next book should be about like different war games you can kind of pregame in your marriage, and just be like, what happens if I don't have an hour ever to myself? Like, you know, what happens if we move for your your career? Like, what happens if you fall in love with me of 20 years ago, but I'm still me of now? Like, what is, you know, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in a marriage that people should think about. A lot of it's pretty predictable.
Yeah, yeah. I actually think we're out of time for questions. We've gone a little over. Thank you all so much. I will sign books, and then if you have a question, I'm also will be giving you stickers.
Ooh.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Hi.